Loki Season 2 Episode 2 is finally out, and while I do think this may be a little bit of a slow burner episode, I do think that there are things going on behind the scenes, and especially with that ending, there are crazy things that are about to happen. We're going to break down this episode, and I'm going to give my thoughts on everything about this episode, so if you guys want to stay tuned on everything Marvel, everything Star Wars, everything Loki, hit that subscribe button and join us on the road to 1,000 subs. With all that stuff out of the way, let's get into this because there's a lot to talk about. This episode starts off with Loki and Mobius going back in time on the sacred timeline to find Brad. Brad is actually X5 who went back in time on the sacred timeline to live a normal life. He was that really annoying hunter guy, but he's really good at his job and they know it's going to be hard to catch him. They want to catch him because, well, he's a very good hunter, but he hasn't found Sylvie yet. Something isn't adding up and they think he knows. They catch X5, bring him back to the TVA and realize that his time pad has been meddled with. They go check out OB and they tell him that everything they need to know about this time pad and why it's different and why it's acting differently, why he was able to go on the secret timeline is in his manual. We get great moments between Mobius and Loki here trying to figure out what's going on, and they really have this sort of solid friendship foundation that was set in the first season. Now it's evolving, now it's stable, now it's just something that we get to see every week and it's great. Only 2 episodes in, this already feels like a serialized TV show that we watch every week, not hoping for something crazy every single time. We get these relationships with our characters that we get to actually spend time with, similar to what Star Wars has done with Ahsoka. It's just really nice to keep an upbeat pace and a fast pace while still getting these good character moments. They go to interrogate Brad Wolf, also known as X5, and well, it doesn't work. Remember, he's very good at his job, so he gets under the skin of both Loki and Mobius. With that being said, Loki and Mobius actually take a recess here, go eat some key lime pie, and talk about how they can get under this guy, how they can find out where Sylvie is. Meanwhile, OB is trying to fix the temporal loom and make sure all of the lines, all of the timelines don't go crazy. Because remember, the TVA has changed now. These people do not want to prune timelines anymore. They want multiple lines to exist so everyone can have a life. And for this to happen, Ouroboros has to make sure that everything flows neatly. Unfortunately, it's not going so well, and something is happening. Multiple times throughout this episode, he says, we're all gonna die, this isn't working, they can't save everything. So with that being said, the time is running out and Loki and Mobius have to try one more time to find out where Sylvie is. Only this time, Loki really plays into his mischievous, godlike qualities. And Brad actually brings this up to him in a great scene earlier on. He is the god of mischief. He is born to cause trouble and sort of, play the darker side. X5 also brings up the fact that he is not a hero, he is a villain, but Loki is trying to change this. And while he's changing this, he's still using his sort of devilish qualities, but for a good reason. So Loki and Mobius sort of set up a trap, making it think that Loki is going rogue on Brad or X5. He locks Mobius out of the cell and begins to torture Brad. I thought this was a really great scene. It shows the devilish side to Loki still, and the way they've outsmarted X5 or Brad here by making him think that Mobius and Loki aren't on the same side here was great. Meanwhile, B-15 and Casey go to Ouroboros and find out that they need Miss Minutes in order to overload the time clock and fix everything. Only the problem is Miss Minutes has been offline and they need Renslayer to sort of connect the dots. And it's worth pointing out that Loki tells Mobius in this episode that they have contacted Renslayer when Loki was in the past and heard the recording between her and He Who Remains or Kang. Jumping back over to Loki and Mobius, now that they've squeezed the information out of Brad, they go to the sacred timeline and find Sylvie where we left her in the first episode. The first episode's post-credit scene showed her walking into a McDonald's during the 70s, and in this second episode, she's actually working there. She has a life on the timeline and this is all she ever wanted. Only when Loki walks in, she's starstruck. They haven't spoken since that very fateful event with He Who Remains back in season 1. Loki says that they desperately need her help to come back to the TVA and figure out what happened, what went wrong, what happened with He Who Remains. But Sylvie loves her life here. Loki tells Sylvie that he has seen the future. He has seen Sylvie in the TVA again in that elevator shaft that we saw in the first episode when Loki time jumped to the future when somebody, presumably another Loki, pruned him from behind. Sylvie says, look, that may be the future that you saw, but that isn't the future I'm going to live, although it's probably going to happen. Because we find out a bombshell realization that Brad has been stalling Mobius and Loki this entire time. This has been a complete setup. Now, maybe Brad is telling the truth here, and maybe he did want to live his life on the timeline, but while Loki and Mobius and Sylvie are here on the timeline, Dox and all of the other rogue TVA agents are taking all of the time bombs to the sacred timelines that are branching and pruning all of them. They all rush back to the TVA, trying to prevent all of these sacred timelines from being pruned, but it looks like they're a little too late. The episode leaves on a very somber note, with Hunter B-15 looking at the screens, looking all of those lives that were just lost. Sylvie tells Loki she wants nothing to do with this, and Loki desperately needs her to stay around, both for the mission of protecting the timelines, but also for his own personal emotional reasons. But in spite of that, Sylvie does end up going back to her timeline and ponders what just happened on the roof of her own car. But if you look closely, there is something that you may have missed in this scene, in this closing scene. In her hands, Sylvie has the time manipulator that Kang, or He Who Remains, had in the end of Loki Season 1. This device allowed He Who Remains to rewind time a couple of minutes just so Loki and Sylvie could not attack him. She stole this device and she still has it. And that's it for this episode. Yes, this sort of seemed like a bridge of the gap between the first and presumably what's going to be the rest of the season. And while not too many things did happen, this was a very good setup for what is going to come in the future episodes. There were some fantastic moments and I really liked it, and I definitely understand why most people who have seen the first 4 episodes call this the weakest entry. But again, those who have seen the first 4 episodes say that episode 3 and 4 are mind-blowing. Personally, I really liked it. I'm gonna watch it again because I feel like a lot of the elements of it kind of went over my head during the first watching. And Loki is definitely a series where I feel like you have to watch it multiple times to really get a grasp on all of the thematic elements and all of the storylines. So if you guys agree or disagree with that, let me know down in the comments. Also, just let me know what you thought about this episode and where you think this is going to go. What does it mean that Sylvie has Kang, or He Who Remains, time turner machine? Is she pulling the strings behind the scenes, or is she holding on to something that could potentially lead to a greater threat? Because we know now that all the timelines have branched, there are so many Kangs coming to conquer. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Again, leave a comment down below with your thoughts, and I will see you all very, very soon.